Okay. Welcome, everyone. So, as usual, we'll do introductions first. My name is Tim Wicks, and I currently serve as Kanto, or head of practice here at City Center.
Yeah, we're on. You can hear us. You all can hear us.
We're on.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm Gudgel. I'm one of the resident priests here at San Francisco Zen Center, and also the director of online content.
And I'm Kim Kogan Dai-Ho Hart, a former resident here and currently serving as a priest for the San Francisco Zen Center.
Okay, so as usual, we will have a presentation for 10 minutes, and then we're going to talk for 10 minutes.
Right.
And then you all are going to go break up into smaller groups and talk for 20 minutes, and then we're going to leave.
Then we're going to get back together.
Then we're going to get back together.
We'll pop the questions.
We're going to get back together. Then we're going to leave.
And this is the
First,
last
we'll
one.
get back together. Yes.
This is the last one.
Any other housekeeping?
Well, I think we should say that it's the last one so that people...
It's a part of my talk.
Ah,
It is the last one.
Great.
okay, well, that one.
And
It's a part of my welcoming. Welcome to the last one. You've stolen a little bit of my thunder.
maybe I'll just also add that there is an online area dedicated to this discussion salon, which will remain open and available after this if anyone wants to access the PDF of the readings or any of the various notices that we've sent out. The easy way to access that would be to register online for this event, which you can still do through today until it disappears from the calendar. And if anyone has any questions about getting the digital materials or anything related to the online component, feel free to get in touch with me or anyone at San Francisco Zen Center that can direct you to me. And recordings of these sessions are also being posted on our YouTube channel if anyone wants to revisit all of the wondrous Buddha nature learning we've done.
And while we're all in this space and we have a wonderful dynamic going in here, I just wanted to let you all know that we've heard from a lot of the folks who are online, and they've also been saying how much they've been enjoying it and sending feedback and stuff. So our Sangha is so much bigger than everybody we see in this room, and so just a shout out to all you guys online. It's nice to see you.
So we've made a characteristic of a salon, which is what this is, a salon, tea. So if you don't have any tea, please feel free to get up and get some. You should feel free to use the restroom or anything like that as you need to. So, so this is the last of our Busshō salons. Welcome to everyone online. Thank you all very much for coming. I mentioned in the first meeting that I was going to collect some definitions of Buddha nature, and I've done that. My friend Ron, who was here for the first class, he said, you know, I found on Wikipedia a definition of Buddha nature, and it's 2 paragraphs long, and so the implication was that he didn't really need to come to the class. He's not here tonight. He might be online. Hello, Ron, if you're online. But it's actually much shorter than 2 paragraphs. The definition of Buddha nature on Wikipedia is the innate potential for all sentient beings to become a Buddha, or the fact that all beings already have pure Buddha essence. And I've got 2 others, one from Shohaku Okamura, which is Buddha nature, that is the pure and undefiled mind as the essential self-nature, hidden and covered as it may be, thanks to our deluded, discriminative minds. And Kokyo Henko, the ungraspable, luminous, compassionate nature of ordinary awareness itself is called Buddha nature. So, a lot of crossover there, a lot of essences. Those examples are doing what it is that Dogen, I don't think, really wanted us to do. And I've kind of had a feeling, as we've been doing this, that Dogen is sort of standing behind me right there going, no, that's not it, and that's not it either. And Dan actually spoke last week about how difficult it is to talk about Buddha nature, and how difficult it is to define, how difficult it is to really grasp it. And so I just want to say you're all very brave for coming here and sticking at it, and it's very impressive to me. The reason that I chose the section that I did was because Dogen speaks about how it is that Buddha nature is not just sentient beings. My first teacher, when I came to Buddhism some 25 years ago, was a Theravadan Buddhist. And as we studied with him, it began to feel as though there were some exclusivity to our practice. We would talk about ending suffering for sentient beings, and because we're all scientifically aware right now, we would ask, well, how small do you go when considering, say, for instance, the precept to not kill? How far, as far as sentient beings, do you go? There are microorganisms that we're killing all the time, so can we still consider ourselves to be following the precept of not killing? And my teacher I don't think he was really stumped, but he decided to ask his friend. He has a friend named Christopher Titmuss, who's an eminent Theravadan teacher, who, he asked Christopher Titmuss, exactly is included in sentient beings. And Titmuss said that any being that has a mother or a face is a sentient being. So any organism that self-divides or is so small that it doesn't have a recognizable face wasn't considered to be a sentient being. This is kind of like a cutoff point once it gets so small. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, a sentient being is one that has senses and responds to touch and taste and sight and so on. So this cutoff point of Christopher Titmuss's struck me as incredibly arbitrary and exclusive somehow, and not influenced by what it was that I was beginning to understand at the beginning of my practice, beginning to understand as all-inclusive Buddhism. It smacked of the exclusivity that I was also beginning to recognize in Theravadan Buddhism. In Theravadan Buddhism, the ideal is that of the Arhat, the lone monk who goes off into the mountains to seek their own enlightenment. It was beginning to appear to me in my Sangha with my teacher as though the Sangha was really supporting the enlightenment of my teacher. We were kind of like assistants to his awakening. So the whole reason why I came to San Francisco, I studied with this teacher for 4 years and slowly was coming to a few things here at San Francisco Zen Center. And the whole reason why I ended up only coming here and kind of not practicing with that teacher anymore was because of the inclusivity of the Bodhisattva way. The Bodhisattva works towards liberation, just like the Arhat does, but forgoes entering nirvana till all beings awaken together. And this very much appealed to my democratic sensibilities, and it felt inclusive of all beings, much more so. There was no cutoff point like there had been before. And here in this reading for this week, Dogen takes it a step further by talking about insentient beings having Buddha nature as well. This is true inclusivity and speaks to the impermanence that is central to Buddhist practice. All phenomena lives a life that passes and their form changes into something else. So on page 21, and I'm my translation is the middle one, the Tanahashi Weitzman translation. Down at the very bottom, it says, all living beings, Dogen says, have Buddha nature. Grass, trees, land, and earth are heart. As they are heart, they are living beings. As they are living beings, they have Buddha nature. Sun, moon, stars are all heart. As they are heart, they are living beings. As they are living beings, they have Buddha nature. So Dogen uses the Chinese character of Xin, and Xin is literally translated as heart-mind. In Eastern physiognomy, there's not such a big divide between the mind and the heart as there is in our Western cultures. However, Waddell and Abe, this is their translation, Dan's translation, and Nishijima Cross, Kim's translation, they all translate Shin as mind, which has got a totally different feeling. So when you read all that, all living beings have Buddha nature, grass, trees, land and earth are mind, rather than our heart, it has a totally different meaning to it, to me, anyway. I really like the Tanahashi Weitzman translation because these are, Tanahashi and Mel Weitzman are sensitive artists, as I am. And the translation of Shin into heart is really important to them when talking about life. That all phenomena in its impermanent interconnectedness is somehow living, and are what we are all connected to as practitioners of the way. A kind of like a universal organism, a great big universal organism. 2 weeks ago, Kim spoke about the temporal characteristic that we need to understand in order to get closer to knowing what Buddha nature is. This has to be a part of our understanding of Buddha nature, or we see things as static. There's movement in time and movement in impermanence. I am air, water, carbon, calcium. As time passes, the water in me will become part of the atmosphere, and the carbon will become soil. So in order to understand Buddha nature, we need to understand this time element. As time passes, all things change. It's then that we can understand the impermanence and interconnectedness of all phenomena, of all things. Because it is in this transitory impermanence that Buddha nature acts as an essence to our interconnectedness. And that's enough for right now. Who would like a copy? Does anyone, Does anyone else want a copy of?
At the back bedroom, 10 hours solution. Hart.
Oops. Anybody else? Hand those out.
And tomorrow, read your comments for the online first.
I'm sorry?
Read your
Oh,
comments.
yes. For the online folks, the prompt is Buddha nature permanent? And now we're going to talk.
Yes,
for
there's
10
something
minutes.
that you said that really struck me, and I
Okay.
loved it, when you said that your carbon and I think
Water,
and water, exactly,
calcium.
and calcium. What are these things if not insentient? But this is what we're made of. It's like, it just proves Dogen's point, you know?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, it proves his point. It was beautifully put, you know. And I was also really struck with this the difference between the heart and mind. And it does read so differently because for me, heart is like about feeling, and mind isn't so much. And it just, again, talking about the sentient versus the insentient, I remember one of our eldest, sorry, changing my glasses so I can see you guys. One of our elder statesmen of San Francisco Zen Center, Blanche Hartman, who passed a few years ago, was very particular, and I believe she got it from Suzuki Roshi, about not scraping chairs across the floor. And I remember thinking, like, but this is like this is an insentient being, I'm moving it, but I'm making the noise, and it's creating this reverberation and annoyance for everybody. So where do I end? My effect on the world, where does that end? And if we are time and effect and activity, why are we calling this distinction? It doesn't make sense. So I really appreciate Dogen just calling that, you know.
So does a chair have Buddha nature?
Have is the wrong word.
Is a chair Buddha nature?
Of course.
Very good.
She's definitely not sure.
I think there's something about this, the sort of example that you used of the body being made up of air and water, calcium, that sort of example for me really resonates, kind of looking at the big picture of the whole universe. You know, if Buddha nature is, I don't know, connected to this body in some way, this body is in this room, so Buddha nature is also connected to this room, and this room is part of this planet, so the planet is not excluded from Buddha nature. So there is kind of a, I don't know, in some sense it kind of feels like, well, if Buddha nature is everywhere, is anywhere, then it's everywhere. I don't know. There's something about that sort of feels right, but when I try to sort of think into it, it doesn't really make sense in some ways. Yeah. And I think that's where this sort of heart-mind distinction in the translations, I think, gets really interesting. Because when I first read, I read the Waddell and Abe and then the Nishijima and Cross, I was thinking mind, 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 and I was thinking of, there's this koan story, flag waving in the wind, is the flag waving, is the wind waving, and the teacher who responded to that said, your mind is waving. And so when I think about what is a sentient being or what is not a sentient being from this kind of mind translation perspective, it's almost as if something about the way that mind includes and touches everything, or potentially can, kind of brings along Buddha nature with it. But from the heart translation, it's more like the feeling or the experience of living is what's connected to Buddha
It's a
nature.
radical thing to do.
Yeah.
It's usually, Shin is usually translated as mind. And in fact, our whole school is referred to sometimes as the mind-only school, because Bodhidharma said that you only needed to read the Lankavatara Sutra, which is sometimes referred to as the mind-only sutra. But if you change it to heart, with a heart-only tradition, that radically changes everything.
California.
Well, I prefer to say artist, sensitive artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually brings to mind, talking about this translation issues, we were speaking with Leanne earlier about when we're reading different translations, how do we know which one is correct? And it's really valuable to come back to your own practice. Like, that's what I was thinking, you come back to your own practice, your own understanding, and have this open curiosity and really try and investigate which it is. For me, mine resonates more, but a lot of that's to do with my own sort of personality, But I also want to go into something else that's in the section I had to read, which is where they have that, where it says, living beings all have Buddha nature, drop off the have Buddha nature. It's very clear about that, And I think we can often get like stuck in that. And some of those early translations of Buddha nature, they're completely stuck in the have of
Mhm.
having Buddha nature.
Mhm.
They're completely stuck in it. And Dogen
And so there's a grasping, there's an objectification of it that is
yes,
very limiting.
very limiting, and also an entire misunderstanding because it implies something is there to be had, and that's just not how it is. He does say, drop off the have Buddha nature. Dropping off is one solid rail of I, and one solid rail of I is the bird's path. I have no idea what that means. Do you know what that means?
Solid rail is something, I'm just going to try right here.
Okay.
A solid rail is something graspable, and the bird's path disappears.
Oh, I love it.
Disappears.
That's perfect. That's great. And also, he goes on later to say, this is in your translation, but it is not that his expression is no valuable teaching, but he may not have understood the deep meaning of his own words. So he's actually calling this guy out here.
Yeah, and he talks about that in others. In Dan's, I think he spoke about how it is that there are some masters who never even mention Buddha nature.
Yeah.
So,
But it does go on to say in my translation, which I really like, but we do not always understand ourselves the truth which we are equipped. So it gives us some sort of like, you're equipped with this truth already, you have it, just open your eyes to it, you know. He's offering us some grace, I think. But I really appreciate that, you know, he has strong opinions, and he seems to have clarity of vision. So, how are we doing on time? Is it time to go? Yeah, 3 more minutes? All right. It was interesting, sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm just, you know, for me sometimes this sort of debate or question of what does or doesn't have Buddha nature, or where is Buddha nature. Sometimes it feels like there's something helpful in asking myself what doesn't have Buddha nature, or what is excluded. And I think just the having, the sort of perspective of having and keeping, identifying, somehow seems, I don't know, a little exclusionary or human-centric in some way.
it's objectifying.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and I don't think Dogen wants us to do that at all. He doesn't want us to
Mhm.
get anywhere near it.
But also, when you see the truth of things, there are no distinct objects, so it's just wrong. Yeah, there's no distinction. Not in any kind of solid way, because we're all temporal, so you can't have Buddha nature. I must say that your translation, Waddell and Abe, really threw me when he said, yeah, we should examine why it is not said all sentient beings are as such Buddha nature. Why instead it is said all sentient beings are being Buddha nature. The being of being Buddha nature must without fail fall away. And I'm like, what? That's completely contradicting everything that I understand. And it contradicts the other 2 translations, so it's kind of...
Well, you know, we were talking, as you said, with Leanne about how do you know what is the best translation.
Yeah.
We need to have multiple translations. We
Absolutely.
need to have new generations of translators, because the way it is that we see things and how it is that we understand things changes.
Yes.
So I just love this,
Yes.
having these 3 translations all
Who
together.
did we thank for this? Who did this originally? Was it Julia?
It was Kokyo.
Yeah, I got it from Kokyo.
Yeah.
I don't have to know
Shout out
what
to
Kokyo got.
Kokyo.
Yeah.
Kokyo Ankle, thank you very much.
Very handy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hopefully with permission.
We only did a single chapter, so we're saying. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to break up into groups, into small groups. What did you decide?
I think I did consensus.
We found no consensus.
No consensus. Okay, so can we hear what the different sides of the discussion were?
We had a strong consensus on that.
One moment, please.
So as far as consensus goes, we had no consensus on the question of is Buddha nature permanent, because there's so much
Okay.
there. But we had a consensus on that we couldn't really come to a consensus.
All right.
Which is entirely appropriate.
So did you talk about consensus the whole time, or did you talk about...
Well, actually, now that you mention it, Tim, we were actually getting at consensus, because in any given moment, it's a consensus. And what we actually experience by the nature of our senses in contributed moments together, that's what we were kind of getting at, wasn't it? I'm not even sure what I just said.
Everyone else in your group is frowning.
We do that.
That's not what you're talking about at all.
But it does make a point close to my heart, which is that it's in the action of the moment that whatever is happening is there. And if Buddha nature is happening in every moment, that's kind of permanent, but it's never the same. So, thank you.
It's kind of permanent, but it's never the same thing. All right.
Happening every moment.
Yeah, connection to time. Our discussion came back to a connection to time a couple of times as well.
Okay, anyone else? Want to be brave enough to...
Yeah.
Got one up here.
Hello.
Hello.
I would just like to bring a question that I had in my discussion group to the three of you. You mentioned in your introductory remarks this question of whether or not anything can be outside of Buddha nature. And what came up for me in my head when you said that was greed, hate, and delusion. Right? Because, and what I was thinking, I was like, okay, they're constructs, they're ancient constructs, maybe before the dawn of man constructs, right? And they are. So I guess it's that question: are greed and hatred and delusion how are they part of this? And I heard some wonderful responses from my group, and I still feel like I'm just sort of grappling, and so I would just be interested to hear any thoughts that you might have to continue to illuminate that question for me.
So you're wondering if only the good stuff is a part of Buddha nature?
Maybe that's part of it. Or maybe there's a wish to believe that...
The bad stuff is outside, the poisons are outside. Is that what you're asking?
Well, actually, she asked when she was asking. She wasn't talking about. She was talking more about karmic influence than good and bad.
Oh. Oh. We have a question online? Beck is furiously waving so this might be an answer to this.
Is that an answer? Because otherwise we should address the...
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I think we should address... Because I think it's interesting, you're saying karmic influence. Influence and karma, both by their nature, are temporal. They are arising in the moment. As anything that arises in the moment, it's an expression of time. It's an expression of Buddha nature. That's the way I would understand it. And it doesn't exclude anything. The same way the lotus grows out of mud, to go back to your good and bad, all of these things are what feed any given moment. That would be my very simplistic understanding.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I guess what occurs to me, I'm going to say it even though I don't know if it's right, but these sort of concepts are not, they're not beings in themselves. They're sort of events or understandings that are arising in the moment.
But so are beings.
They are, yes. And so I would, my sort of, maybe this is a gut instinct on this, is that greed, hate, and delusion, for instance, would not themselves be like made of Buddha nature, but they are arising with the influence of Buddha nature, and that they're arising and receding are still interwoven with Buddha nature. But I feel like they are there does seem to be, I'm experiencing some distinction between a sort of concept that is a creation of a sentient being's experience and something that is maybe more fundamental about what is arising in the present moment. But boy, as I talk about it, the distinction seems to get slipperier and slipperier. Yeah?
Let's see what Burke's online person had to say. Burke?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear it. Go ahead.
Okay, every time I hear one of you say something, it all changes.
Can you hear that? Burke, can you hear that?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about innocence, form, and emptiness. Because one of our people was real into Tibetan Buddhism, and he talked about luminous emptiness. And, okay, so does a chair have Buddha nature? Obviously not. A chair is Buddha nature, and of course it is. But then, then we got on the usual stuff of karma, like, is Donald Trump Buddha nature? And we all thought, I think, that from basic Buddhist teaching he is, and from our karmically influenced point of view, we don't want to say that. And so we have the identity of relative and absolute. So is Buddha nature both permanent and impermanent? That kind of stuff. Yeah, so we were talking, and we didn't come to any conclusion about these issues. So anyway, so that was the question, is Buddha nature permanent? And maybe, I don't know, the answer where I'm at now basically is Buddha nature is both permanent and impermanent, which is freaky, and it's really into time, because permanence is time, and so all this is floating around.
There
And so,
it is.
yeah,
There it is. So there's a book I mentioned in my group. There's a book that's called Pruning the Bodhi Tree. And it's a book of this debate about whether or not Buddha nature is permanent that took place in Japanese scholarship circles in the late 90s and early 20s. It's a fabulous book, but it's unresolvable, really, and it was unresolved mostly in this book, the parts that I read anyway. But Kim has got something very important to say that kind of sums up some of what it is.
But there's a lot of echoing.
Yeah, is the room mic or the computer, neither of those are, then if you could just turn us down a little bit, I think that would
Yes,
do
a
it.
bit down. Buddha nature abides in emptiness. The arising and falling of the moments, that's the temporal aspect of it, is effectively the definition of what emptiness is, a constant arising and falling of the moments. And that is where Buddha nature abides. Is Buddha nature permanent? It abides in emptiness.
That is very elegant.
Elegant, yeah. It's
Buddha
not mine,
nature
but
abides in emptiness. Victoria,
we need the mic.
we need the microphone, yes.
I wonder if we could just agree that if we say that X has Buddha nature, it's a problem. What is Buddha nature? If we say X has or does not have or is, both have and does not have, both is and does not is, or neither has nor is, etc., 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 all of them are problems. I believe it's because this conversation is about the language that we use to see if we can see into and care about our life more. And so I wonder if we could just agree that there's certain parts of our lives that are kind of post-doc level Buddha nature discernment opportunities. And certain parts of our lives which are easier Buddha nature discernment opportunities, and that we don't exactly discern the Buddha nature, but that discernment occurs. Like Eihei Dōgen was talking about enlightenment being an accident and Zazen making us accident prone. Can we just hold it lightly? And I'm glad that we have this tradition to talk about all these things. And I'm really glad for this more informal opportunity in which there's 3 different translations and 3 different people, because
And so we have the room and also practice, which is so great. Yeah.
anyway, I just wonder if we could understand it functionally a little bit, because that brings us back to practice and that helps.
I think that's a great way to end this whole series.
No.
Busshō. Yeah, it's fun.
No.
It is fun.
It's in the living of it.
Thank you all very much. This was a wonderful experiment, and in my opinion, it was successful. Please continue to give us feedback. Did you two want to say anything in final words?
Oh, I loved it. I started practicing here with all of you and getting the opportunity, the forced opportunity to study Busshō. It was great. So.
Yeah, and thank you all for bringing your own practice and your own lives and your own questions.
Yeah.
I think if we don't keep questioning, we lose the thread.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's bow out. Thank you all once again.
Thank you.
See if you could help us put stuff back.
Thank you.